The client that had been referred to me was called Nadia. She was originally a refugee from Eritrea and she had a 16-year-old son. She had been referred to our outreach team by social services because she was facing imminent homelessness the next day. So our outreach team had taken Nadia the previous day to Kingston Council's homeless unit. The experience had been quite traumatic because Nadia lacked paperwork, she lacked bank statements, and the homeless officer had been quite aggressive with both my colleague and Nadia, but grudgingly gave her an appointment to attend at 9 a.m. the following day. So at 8:30 I attended Kingston and I waited on the steps and I looked down and I saw a lady surrounded by bags, looking very distressed, and at that moment I was totally shocked because there she was standing with all her possessions around her. I introduced myself to her and she told me a little bit about herself. Nadia had been in rented accommodation. She'd been in this accommodation after the breakdown of her marriage. She had been coerced by the landlord that had rented her property to pay in £10,000 to secure her rent for the year. And to do this, she had taken a £10,000 loan out. On top of that, the landlord then started threatening her to pay a monthly rent. That, alongside repaying the £10,000 loan and trying to live, had put a great burden on her. So there we were in the homeless department waiting for an appointment. And at that moment I asked her, "Where's your son?" And she said, "He's sitting his GCSEs. He's stored his clothes under the stairwell and will collect them later." I was totally flabbergasted at the whole situation. At 9:30 we were called in and we went through the process. We went through the process of, did she have the funds to secure a deposit to pay on a new rented property? Could she perhaps fund her own bed and breakfast for the night? The answer was no, because she had no financial means. We went through the process of whether the council could lend her the deposit, but because of the loan and her debt, she didn't have the financial needs to qualify for a deposit scheme from the council. So we spent the next 5 hours at Kingston making financial statements, tracking down bank statements. And one of the biggest problems we had is that she had no tenancy agreement or no eviction notice. And it was more complicated because it wasn't a simple eviction from a landlord. It was the mortgage company who owned the property that was making the landlord bankrupt and repossessing the property. So it was no fault of Nadia's that she was being made homeless. So once we went through these processes, we called the mortgage company, they faxed a letter of eviction over. We were able to then get into the process that she could have temporary accommodation because she had a child at school. Had she not have had a child, she may not have qualified for accommodation. At 2 p.m, they finally said they'd found her accommodation in Uxbridge. You know, we were in Kingston upon Thames. Nadia was not familiar, had never been to Uxbridge, had never heard of Uxbridge. So we had to negotiate that situation. We had to work out how we were going to get her son from school in Kingston to Uxbridge. She was given a time limit of being in Uxbridge for 5 p.m. to pick the keys up. We then had to complete forms and bank direct debits to ensure the security of her property. But also at 2 p.m, a bomb was discovered in Kingston University, which was about half a mile down the road. And so the staff started talking about evacuating the building. And I was really beginning to panic that I was not going to be able to complete the forms, that I wasn't going to be able to secure the accommodation that Nadia needed. So I just started praying very hard and writing very fast and really trying to keep the officer I was dealing with focused on our plight rather than her evacuation of the building. And by 3 p.m, we had secured the accommodation. We had the lease in our hands. But the next problem was to gather all of Nadia's belongings, get her fed, get her on a bus to Uxbridge, where she had never been before. And that's when a slight miracle happened, because when we got to the bus stop in Kingston to get to Uxbridge, a young Eritrean man just appeared out of nowhere and said, "Can I help my sister?" So that's how we secured Nadia's accommodation that day. And the following week, we made her an appointment and she met the team. And from that point onwards, we've been supporting her with debt. And she now is in more temporary accommodation, but within Kingston, and her son is studying accountancy at sixth form. So it's a success, but also an ongoing situation.